Here's a feedback session for an MMI question with our experts. Check out the original question in the captions.
All right, thank you again, Varian Station 8. So we asked you here, what is your greatest limitation and how are you working towards overcoming this limitation? So what type of question is this?
I interpreted it as being kind of one of those quirky type questions, just personal information, those types of things.
So there's two different. There's quirky and personal, which sometimes it can be infused together. This was actually very much a personal question, right? So we know the structure for a personal question, and we'll break it down after. I want to look at your response first. So you were, again, good intro, right? Introducing yourself. Always be consistent with that. Good recap, right? You stated what the question was being asked of you before you started. And you went into it right away. You said that you're overly self-critical of yourself, and then you identified some, brief examples, vague at first, and then you kind of went into one. You talked about how you're overcoming this, right? Realizing that people make mistakes. And that's something that you kind of repeated, right? That this is something that you learned from this experience. And then you applied it to moving forward in medical school as well as beyond, which is awesome because that's what we talked about in MMI 1. Right? So for the most part, you had a good idea for the structure here, right? 3 steps. Tell me your story. So now this question, I could have just asked you, what is your greatest limitation? I didn't have to ask you how are you overcoming it. But had I asked you what is your greatest limitation, right? A good critical person, I would have hoped that you would have mentioned how you overcame it or perhaps, of course, how you're overcoming it, right? That's step 1.
Right. Okay.
Your story and how you're overcoming it. So what I would suggest here, I love the examples, but it was too much, right? I would focus on a few, if not one, predominant one, right? That's more impactful, right? Try to come up, and that's why I always say for homework, reflect on personal experience, because I want you to reflect on things like this, right? Come up with one that would have given it some depth and some heart, right? Quality over quantity. So I would have given an example, right? So and how I overcame it. And this is on overcoming it. This is when you have to give yourself credibility. You don't want to simplify it to just people make mistakes. Right? What was it that you did? Was it scheduling, prioritizing, right? Being critical, that's kind of, someone that's always, maybe sometimes harboring their assignment. They don't want to just hand it in, right? They want to just read it and revise it. So maybe you give yourself a time frame. Maybe you prioritize. Maybe you came up with a calendar. Maybe you watched some TED Talks. Maybe you got some counseling. Maybe you approached a friend, right? Someone that seemed like they had it pretty good together and you wanted to talk to them about it. So give yourself credibility, because that's very important on the steps that you've taken. That's why I say focus on one experience if you can. That would make it easy for you too, right? And then, of course, what are your takeaways? Aside from people make mistakes, which is good, but what are your takeaways? Communication, being patient, utilizing resources, right? If you can, of course, you can reference keywords, right? Because for American schools, AAMC core competencies, you can reference like keywords that are emphasized in there, right?
Okay, I was just reading those earlier.
Good, and that's something I want you to start infusing in your speech. But yes, so what are your takeaways? And of course, at that point, it would have been more thorough. And then how could you have applied it moving forward? Then even then, that could have been more thorough, right? Moving forward as a medical student or as a physician, of course, I'm going to communicate. Should I need help, I'm going to utilize my resources. I'm going to collaborate with my team, and I'm going to ask and seek for help. So all that, very good. I think you had the right idea. And then, of course, you conclude with a summary of overall, this is my limitation. This is how I overcame it. This is what I learned from it. And moving forward, this is what I'll apply, should I encounter that issue again.
Okay.
Good. Any questions?
About this one specifically or in general?
About this one.
I don't think so. Yeah, I think you mentioned talking about one experience a little more thoroughly, and I think I definitely can do that.